right, we're back. This is Kevin and Joe McGonigal. We are in the car today for another trip around the block. And today we wanted to talk about first meeting with a potential buyer and a seller. Joe, how do you usually like to structure that meeting?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I think for practice owners, the first time you do this, I think there's a fair amount of anxiety around this meeting. What do I say? Who says what? Who's running the show here? So
it's like a first date.
It is like a first date. It's like a blind first date. It can be about as awkward as it gets sometimes. But we're at all these meetings, so we try to make sure that it's as comfortable as possible. And frankly, as a practice owner, I would say the first thing to do is just from a mindset standpoint or mentally, it's a pretty casual meeting. It really is like a first date. It's a high-level meeting to kind of get to know one another and essentially, determine, do subsequent conversations make sense? Do I see a potential fit here? And then both buyer and seller get to decide that. But anyway, structure the meeting. I really like to have my clients start with an office tour. I think it's a really easy way to kind of break the ice, get some conversation going. You're on the move a little bit. So when the buyer comes in, introduce yourself, let them put down their jacket or whatever they got and say, listen, why don't I take you on a tour and show you the office? And it's quick. It's, 5 to 10 minutes. And then what I like to do is get back to the waiting room.
Yes, we do not want to get stuck in your lab, no matter how nice it is, however fancy your toys are. I'm not sure why, but yeah, we always end up standing in the hallway or the doorway of an operatory. So, usually the waiting room is one of the highlights of the office and where your patients spend a lot of their time getting to know the practice. So this is a good place to sit with a potential buyer to have a conversation and to let them get to know you, on a little bit more personal level.
Absolutely. And you have to realize, as a practice owner, very few buyers, if any, have I seen come with any sort of advisor or broker. So they don't always know what to ask, right?
So we're there trying to help them get their questions answered, which usually, revolve around what does the day-to-day look like in this practice? What's your team and staff makeup? Clinically, is it going to be a good fit? Does our procedure mix line up? Those are the important questions that we try to make sure get asked and answered in that first meeting. Again, to sort of flush out, is there good potential for a second meeting or an opportunity even? Does it make sense to have that? Yeah.
No, I think there's probably, 3 or 4 big bucket questions that buyers are trying to understand. Obviously the physical space, the location of the practice. It might be their first time in that area and they're trying to get a sense of, can I see myself practicing here? I think the next big piece is, do the owner and I, the practice owner and I, have similar philosophy around clinical treatment, diagnosis, how we run and manage a business. And then you alluded to the last part is there a good clinical fit? Meaning, can I do or do I like to do, majority of the procedure mix the seller is doing? And probably more importantly for a lot of buyers is, where's there opportunity for me to add services or grow the practice?
Right. Typically this meeting, maybe it lasts, a half hour, 45 minutes. I've seen them last an hour and a half if the conversation is good and everybody's enjoying the visit. I think ultimately you want somebody to leave that visit thinking, I have a good sense of what happens here day to day, and either I do or don't think there's potential. And I think both of those outcomes are acceptable and really what you're hoping for at the end of that time. How do you usually finish up that meeting?
That's a great question. I always like to leave with the buyer. So I tell my client, when this meeting's over, I'm going to leave with the potential buyer because I can get in touch with my seller anytime. Right. And I really like to capture the buyer's reaction as soon as the meeting's over. So, we'll leave. I'll thank them for coming out. I'll get their initial reaction and then talk about, hey, what's next, right? Do you need more information? Are you talking with your advisor or their lender, et cetera, et cetera? So I like to leave with the buyer.
So I think it's important, wrapping up here, this is a first date. Nobody makes a decision really at this meeting. It's a good chance for you to talk about the culture of the practice, the day-to-day, and just let somebody kind of get a peek behind the curtain, if you will, so that they can decide what their next step is and how they want to move forward.
Sounds good.
All right. Again, this is Kevin and Joe McGonigal with TDS Match, and we'll wrap it up for this time around the block, and we'll see you next time we take a drive.
Thanks.